Unaware of his $100 million fortune, Madison Langston mocked her husband the night his business collapsed, calling him useless, broke, and beneath the life she believed she deserved. To her, Jonathan was just another failed man in a world of winners, a financial analyst whose steady paycheck could no longer fund her dying salon or her rising vanity. But what Madison didn't know was that the man she humiliated and divorced to marry his wealthy investor friend was no ordinary husband. He was the silent heir to a hidden $100 million empire built on discipline, integrity, and legacy. She thought she was escaping failure, but she was walking straight out of love and into a storm she couldn't control. Because Jonathan's calm wasn't weakness, it was calculation. His silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. And when the truth finally surfaced, the woman who mocked his downfall would face the kind of reckoning money couldn't buy. But why did he let her go so easily? Why did a man worth $100 million choose to live as though he had nothing? And when she finally learned who he truly was, what did he do that shocked her? And the entire city? The sun dipped low over the quiet Atlanta suburb, streaking amber light through the curtains of a house that no longer felt like home. Madison Langston moved through the living room with mechanical grace, dropping her purse on the couch, her perfume mingling with the faint scent of takeout. The sound of her heels against the hardwood was once music to Jonathan's ears. Now it marked distance. Jonathan sat at the dining table, laptop open, spreadsheets glowing on the screen. Though his eyes weren't reading anymore, he'd been waiting for her. "You're late again," he said, his voice calm but brittle. Madison didn't look up. "Suppliers ran behind. You know how it is." She loosened her coat and walked to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. "I called the supplier at 4, Jonathan said, turning the laptop toward her. "They said your orders were already picked up this morning." She froze mid-sip. "Then maybe I stopped somewhere else. Do I have to log my every move now?" He stood up slowly, his tie loosened from another long day at the firm. "No, you don't. I just miss knowing where my wife is." Her laughter came sharp. "Maybe you should try being interesting again, Jonathan. Then you wouldn't have to wonder." He felt those words like a bruise reopening. Once, Madison's laughter filled this house with warmth. She was his light, the salon dreamer who talked about changing lives through beauty. He had been her quiet believer, the man who helped her open her first storefront with his savings. But lately, her dreams had grown teeth, and he was no longer part of them. Madison turned on soft jazz from her phone, ignoring him completely. When the notification banner popped up on her screen, Jonathan's eyes caught it. "Preston, you looked perfect today." His chest tightened. "Who's Preston?" he asked, steady but low. She snatched the phone instantly, her smile too quick. "A client. He's helping with the boutique expansion. Don't start this, John." He didn't reply. He just stared at her. The same woman who once prayed with him before dinner, now defending secret messages like a teenager. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe everything still meant something, but silence filled the space between them like smoke, thick and bitter. Later that night, he lay beside her in the dark, listening to her even breathing. He turned toward her, studying the face that had once been his peace. He noticed the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne mixed with her perfume. It wasn't his. The ceiling above felt like it was slowly lowering, pressing the truth against his chest. The days that followed became quieter. Madison's laughter disappeared entirely, replaced by a distracted hum of phone calls and business dinners. Jonathan buried himself in work at the finance firm, his heart splintering piece by piece every time she said she'd be home late. Then came the morning that shattered the illusion completely. Sirens screamed down their street just after dawn. Jonathan ran barefoot into the chill air to see orange flames devouring Madison's salon. The windows cracked, the glass weeping smoke. Madison was there, trembling. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, the smell of burnt chemicals clinging to her skin. He wrapped his coat around her, pulling her close. "It's okay, Maddie. We'll rebuild," he whispered. But her eyes didn't match the tears. There was something distant in them, something rehearsed. Firefighters said faulty wiring, neighbors said bad luck. But when Jonathan found the insurance papers already filled out and signed days before the fire, he felt the bottom fall out of his chest. He didn't confront her. Not yet. That night she clung to him, whispering, "We'll rise again." But her gaze was over his shoulder, not at him, towards something or someone beyond. As he lay awake beside her, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, one question repeated in his mind like a curse. Was the fire an accident or an exit? Madison's laughter returned, but it wasn't for Jonathan anymore. It was lighter, flirtatious, the kind she used to save for him in the early days of their marriage when ambition still meant building something together. Now it echoed through restaurant lobbies and private lounges across Atlanta, always in the company of Preston Hale, the smooth-talking investor who had promised to save her business. Jonathan knew. He'd seen enough to stop denying it, but he played his part perfectly, the calm husband whose silence everyone mistook for defeat. At first, he told himself it was just emotional betrayal. Maybe Madison was lost, desperate, confused. But one evening after work, he drove past her boutique. The lights inside were dim, candles glowing in soft amber. Through the glass, he saw Madison leaning against Preston's shoulder, their fingers brushing as they shared a glass of wine. Her laughter, the same one she used to release into his neck after long days, now belonged to another man. He didn't move. He just watched, his hand trembling on the steering wheel. That night when Madison came home, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his, Jonathan didn't ask questions. He made dinner, poured her wine, listened to her talk about potential investors. She smiled as though everything was normal. He nodded, pretending to believe her, but something inside him hardened. Love didn't leave him. It changed shape. It became quiet observation. It became patience sharpened to a blade. Days turned into weeks. Madison spent more time networking while Jonathan began piecing together the puzzle behind her lies. Through his firm's database, he discreetly checked Preston's portfolio and found something astonishing. Preston's own company was drowning in debt, using borrowed funds to appear successful. Madison thought she had traded up, but she'd traded trust for illusion. Jonathan printed everything quietly, placed it in a folder, and kept it in his office drawer. Proof. One evening while Madison was out meeting suppliers, Jonathan received a message from a private investigator he had hired, someone Grace, his cousin, had recommended. Attached were photographs, Madison and Preston at a rooftop bar, her hand resting over his, her wedding ring missing. Another photo showed them checking into the St. Regis together. Jonathan's chest ached, not from surprise, but from confirmation. He looked around their quiet house, the one he had built with her from the ground up, and whispered to himself, "I guess she really is gone." The next morning, Madison came home glowing. She kissed him on the cheek like a stranger would, graceful, detached, polite. "You should get some rest," she said, brushing past him. "You look tired." Jonathan smiled faintly. "Just a long week," he replied. But inside, a storm had started brewing. A few days later, she made her move. Over breakfast, she slid an envelope across the table. "Jonathan, I think we both know this isn't working anymore." Inside were divorce papers, clean, precise, already notarized. He looked up slowly, searching her face for hesitation. There was none, only relief. "Preston's been helping me see things clearly," she said quietly, almost proud. "You've been holding me back. You don't dream big enough." Jonathan felt something in him shatter and reassemble in the same breath. "So this is about ambition?" he asked softly. "It's about survival," she replied. "I need someone who can lift me higher." He stared at her for a long moment, then reached for a pen and signed without a word. Madison blinked, unprepared for how calmly he accepted it. "You're not even going to fight?" she asked, confused. He looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I don't fight people who've already left." She laughed, almost mocking. "You'll thank me one day, Jonathan. Maybe when you realize you were never meant for my world." But what Madison didn't know was that her world, every investor, every contract, every financial handshake, already orbited the man she had just walked away from. Jonathan's father's inheritance, still sealed in trust, was about to open, and the same quiet man she discarded for failure was moments away from inheriting a fortune that would dwarf Preston's empire entirely. That night, as Madison packed her final bag, Jonathan watched her from the doorway. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. She smiled faintly. "I already have." When the door closed behind her, Jonathan let out a slow breath, his heart breaking not from loss, but from clarity. He whispered to himself, "You just walked away from $100 million, Madison, and you'll never know until it's too late." Outside, rain began to fall softly, tracing lines down the window like silent applause for the end of something once beautiful. Jonathan's apartment was quieter now. No perfume in the air, no laughter echoing from the hallway, no voice calling his name. It was the kind of silence that didn't just sit in a room, it buried itself inside a man. The divorce was finalized, the house sold, and the papers signed with the same precision Madison had used to erase him from her story. She had moved into Preston's penthouse downtown, smiling for cameras, pretending her world had finally found balance. Jonathan didn't fight it. He didn't post about pain, didn't talk to friends, didn't drown his anger in whiskey or women. He went to work every morning at the financial firm, greeted the receptionist, reviewed balance sheets, and left at sunset like nothing had happened. But inside, he was dismantling himself, quietly building something new from the wreckage. It was on one of those muted afternoons that his cousin Grace called. Grace Langston, a corporate attorney, was the only person who saw through his calm facade. "Jonathan," she said, her tone steady but urgent, "I need you to come to the office. There's something your father wanted you to see." He frowned. "My father's been gone for 6 years." "I know," she replied, "but he left a condition, one that's finally matured." That evening, Jonathan sat across from Grace in a mahogany-paneled conference room. She slid an envelope across the table. Old, sealed, his father's handwriting scrawled across the front. "For Jonathan, when he's ready." His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a letter written in his father's firm, elegant hand. "Son, I built quietly so you could live humbly. You've proven your character through loss, not gain. Everything I built, every investment, every holding is now under your name. The family trust, the real estate, the equities, all yours. Don't use it for revenge. Use it for redemption." Grace's eyes softened as she pushed a second document forward. "He built a silent empire, John. Real estate holdings across 5 states, tech investments, energy shares, and a controlling interest in a private fund. The estate's valuation stands at around $120 million. It's all yours, effective immediately." Jonathan didn't move. The weight of the moment pressed against his chest. For years, he had lived modestly, faithfully, thinking small was safe. Now the world had just handed him a fortune large enough to rewrite every definition of failure. He whispered, "He trusted me with this?" Grace nodded. "He always knew you'd find your strength after heartbreak." That night, Jonathan didn't celebrate. He went home, sat by the window, and looked out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Madison was probably toasting her new life with Preston, laughing about her escape from the man she once called a burden. The irony hit hard. She'd traded a man worth $120 million for one drowning in borrowed success. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan quietly began to move pieces. He met with financial advisors, estate planners, and brand consultants, not as the scorned husband, but as a strategist reborn. He took the same focus that once built other men's fortunes and turned it inward. His first project, acquiring a chain of failing salons. It was poetic. The same industry that had destroyed his marriage would now become the foundation of his empire. Under a new name, Langston & Co., he began revitalizing the brand, modernizing each location, blending luxury aesthetics with smart financing. Grace oversaw the contracts, ensuring his name remained hidden. By the end of the year, Langston & Co. became the talk of Atlanta's beauty scene, a rising powerhouse funded by silent capital. Madison, now struggling with her boutique's bills and Preston's financial missteps, couldn't stop hearing about it. Meanwhile, Jonathan maintained his quiet rhythm. He drove the same car, wore the same suits, and greeted his co-workers like nothing had changed. But behind that modest composure was a man with access to more power than anyone around him suspected. Late one night, he received an email from a prospective partner looking to collaborate with Langston & Co. Jonathan opened the attachment and froze. It was Madison's signature at the bottom of the proposal. Her boutique was seeking investment from the very company he owned. He leaned back, staring at the screen, a faint, ironic smile tugging at his lips. "Well," he murmured, "life has an incredible sense of humor." He didn't reject the proposal. He didn't sign it either. He left it there, untouched, watching how fate would move next. For the first time since the divorce, his chest didn't ache. It burned with something else entirely. Not anger, not pride, clarity. Madison thought she'd left a failure behind. What she never realized was that her success had always been standing right in front of her, and now, unknowingly, she was about to work for him. The ballroom at the Grand Monarch Hotel shimmered with gold light, filled with Atlanta's elite, investors, entrepreneurs, designers, and the kind of people who toasted to illusions. Madison Langston, now Madison Hale, moved through the crowd with polished confidence, her laughter carrying just enough charm to turn heads. She wore success like perfume, loud enough to impress, faint enough to fade when examined closely. Beside her, Preston played the role of a devoted partner, his smile wide, his grip possessive. They were hosting the Women in Business Charity Gala, a self-congratulatory event funded largely through loans Preston pretended were investments. Madison saw the evening as her victory lap, proof that she had risen beyond Jonathan, beyond failure, beyond her past. When reporters asked about her journey, she smiled and said, "Sometimes you have to leave behind what's comfortable to become who you were meant to be." The cameras loved it. What she didn't know was that the man she once mocked as unambitious was only a few rooms away, watching everything unfold. Jonathan Langston stood near the bar in a charcoal gray suit, his expression unreadable. He had arrived quietly, invited as a representative of Langston & Co., the anonymous holding company Madison's boutique had recently partnered with. No one knew the CEO's identity. Not yet. He sipped his drink, studying her from across the hall. Madison looked radiant, her posture perfect, her smile trained. But he could see it, the subtle tremor in her left hand when she held her glass. The way her laugh lingered a second too long. She was performing success, not living it. Preston leaned close, whispering in her ear, and Madison laughed automatically. Jonathan could almost predict her next move. He knew her rhythm too well. As the orchestra shifted to a slower melody, the host, a wealthy philanthropist, took the stage. "Tonight," he announced, "we celebrate the women shaping Atlanta's business future. But we also have breaking news, an acquisition that will redefine the beauty industry as we know it." Madison's head turned slightly, curiosity lighting her eyes. The host continued, "Langston & Co., the rising powerhouse behind multiple luxury salon chains, has officially acquired Hale Luxe Boutique and its subsidiaries." The crowd erupted in applause. Madison froze, her breath caught, her smile faltering for just a second before she forced it back. "Acquired?" she whispered, her eyes darting toward Preston. His expression collapsed into confusion. "That's impossible. They said we were negotiating partnership, not acquisition." The host raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man behind Langston & Co., the new CEO and majority owner of Hale Luxe Boutique, Mr. Jonathan Langston." Time stopped. Madison's wineglass slipped from her hand, shattering at her feet. Gasps rippled through the room as Jonathan stepped into the light, his calm presence cutting through the noise like thunder wrapped in silence. Every camera turned. Every whisper turned into disbelief. Madison's knees weakened. She gripped the table behind her as Jonathan crossed the stage, his every step measured, controlled, almost poetic in its restraint. When he reached the podium, he adjusted the microphone and looked straight ahead, not at her, but through her. "I want to thank everyone who believed in rebuilding this industry with integrity," he began, his voice steady and deep. Langston & Co. was founded not out of revenge or rivalry, but out of the belief that true success is quiet, consistent, and earned. He paused, letting the words hang heavy. "Some people chase wealth, others build it, and sometimes those who are mocked for standing still are simply waiting for the right moment to rise." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Madison barely heard it. Her vision blurred. She tried to smile, to keep composure, But every camera caught the truth, the trembling lip, the hollow stare, the ghost of realization dawning across her face. Preston muttered under his breath, "You said he was broke." Madison turned to him, her voice trembling. "He was, I swear, he was." Jonathan stepped down from the stage, ignoring the cluster of reporters forming around him. As he passed Madison's table, their eyes met. For a fleeting second, the past flashed between them, the nights they dreamed together, the mornings they laughed, the promises whispered and broken. Madison whispered, almost inaudible, "Jonathan?" He stopped, his gaze calm but cutting. "You once said I'd thank you for letting me go," he said softly. "You were right. I do." Then he walked past her, leaving her standing amid the wreckage of her own arrogance. Preston turned pale. The acquisition documents, signed weeks earlier under his direction, had transferred ownership completely. Everything, Madison's boutique, Preston's investments, their joint assets, belonged to Langston & Co. He tried to speak, but words failed him. Madison stared at the stage, realizing she had just been outplayed by the very man she'd once called a failure. As the press swarmed Jonathan for interviews, Madison stood frozen, tears threatening to fall. For the first time in years, she understood what power truly looked like, and it didn't shout. It waited. It built. It arrived quietly, wearing dignity as its armor. When the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed, Madison sat alone at the edge of the ballroom, her reflection flickering in the glass of spilled wine. She whispered to herself, "He never raised his voice. He just rewrote my story." Outside, Jonathan's car pulled away from the curb, its headlights slicing through the night. He didn't look back. The world had already done that for him. The night after the gala felt heavier than the city itself. Atlanta glittered outside Madison's penthouse window, but for the first time the lights felt mocking, each one flickering like a reminder of everything she'd lost. The silence between her and Preston was suffocating. He sat in the corner nursing a drink, avoiding her eyes, his arrogance replaced with quiet panic. Their empire, built on loans, appearances, and stolen pride, was gone in one night. Madison stood in front of the mirror, still wearing the gold gown from the gala, her makeup smudged, her earrings missing. She looked at her reflection and saw a stranger, a woman who had traded love for illusion, truth for attention. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from reporters, friends, and gossip columns, all asking the same question. Was it true? Did Jonathan Langston just acquire everything you own? She turned off her phone and whispered, "He couldn't have known. He couldn't have planned all this." But she knew better. The look in Jonathan's eyes when he passed her at the gala wasn't surprise. It was completion. He had known exactly what he was doing, and she had walked straight into it. Preston finally broke the silence. "You said he was broke, Madison. You swore he had nothing left." "I thought he was," she snapped, her voice trembling. "He was a financial analyst living off salary. How could he possibly—" "He played you," Preston interrupted bitterly. "Played both of us." He stood, slamming his glass down. "I'm done. I can't fix this." She turned sharply. "You're leaving?" He didn't answer. He just grabbed his jacket and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The echo of it followed her into the next morning. By dawn, the news was everywhere. Langston & Co. completes multi-million-dollar acquisition of Hale Luxe Boutique. CEO Jonathan Langston rises as Atlanta's newest silent mogul. Her face appeared beside his in headlines, hers in tears, his calm and confident. By noon, Madison had driven to Langston & Co.'s headquarters. The marble lobby stretched wide, sleek, and quiet, its glass walls reflecting the man who had built it all. She didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist recognized her name and called upstairs. Minutes later, Jonathan's assistant appeared. "Mr. Langston will see you," she said softly, as if she already knew this was about closure. Madison stepped into the office, her breath catching. The room was minimalist, elegant, just like him. Jonathan stood near the window, hands in his pockets, watching the skyline. When he turned, his expression was calm, unreadable, the same way it had been the day she left him. "Jonathan," her voice cracked. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." He studied her for a moment before speaking. You didn't care to know. She swallowed hard. I made mistakes. I I was scared, Jonathan. Everything was falling apart in Preston. He said he could help me. You just chose him, Jonathan finished for her. His tone wasn't angry. It was heartbreak made quiet. You chose money you didn't earn over love you already had. Tears welled in her eyes. Please just listen. I never stopped caring about you. He tilted his head slightly. You cared when I signed the divorce papers or when you watched me walk out of court while holding his hand? Madison broke then. The facade shattered. She stepped closer, trembling. Jonathan, please, give me a chance to make it right. He looked at her for a long moment, and for a brief flicker, the man who once adored her surfaced in his eyes. Then it was gone. Madison, he said quietly, I forgive you. Her lips parted with fragile hope. You do? Yes, he said, stepping closer. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean we start over. It means I've let go of what you broke. Her face fell. So that's it. You build an empire, destroy mine, and walk away? He shook his head slowly. I didn't destroy anything. You did. I just stopped protecting your consequences. Madison's voice cracked. Jonathan, please. I have nothing left. He took a deep breath and said softly, Then you finally understand me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She reached out as if to touch him, but he stepped back. Goodbye, Madison, he said gently. I hope you find peace, even if it's not beside me. When she left his office, the air outside felt colder, sharper. The world she'd built on borrowed pride was gone, and the only man who could have saved her had already done so, by walking away. That evening, Jonathan stood by the window again, watching the sunset pour gold over the city. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just exhaled, as if releasing the last fragment of pain that once chained him. Down below, Madison's car pulled away, swallowed by traffic and fading daylight. In that silence, Jonathan finally understood that revenge wasn't about hurting her. It was about becoming someone no betrayal could destroy again. Jonathan's mornings began before sunrise now, calm, deliberate, without noise or bitterness. The skyline glowed faintly against the early dawn as he walked through the glass corridors of Langston & Co., reviewing plans for something he'd been quietly building for months. This new chapter wasn't about profit anymore. It was about purpose. He had turned his father's inheritance into an empire, but it wasn't the money that gave him peace. It was the vision that followed, the same words his father had written in that letter. Don't use it for revenge, use it for redemption. That sentence became his compass. With Grace's help, Jonathan launched the Langston Foundation for Business Integrity, a program designed to support small entrepreneurs, especially women who had lost everything but still dared to rebuild. The irony didn't escape him. He was now funding the same kind of dream Madison once had, only this time for people who built with honesty instead of manipulation. During the foundation's press launch, reporters gathered around him, expecting the polished composure of a billionaire. But Jonathan's words were soft, sincere. The goal isn't to create wealth, he said. It's to create dignity. Because sometimes people don't need saving. They just need a fair start. The room fell silent before erupting in applause. As the cameras flashed, Jonathan's mind wandered briefly, not to the applause, not to the headlines, but to the memory of Madison standing in ashes outside her burned salon, crying for sympathy she no longer deserved. He didn't hate her anymore. He didn't even pity her. He had outgrown the need for either. Meanwhile, Madison's life was unraveling publicly. Preston had disappeared after the fallout, leaving her to face lawsuits, debts, and unpaid investors. Her boutique had officially closed, her accounts frozen, her reputation in tatters. She tried reaching out to former clients, but most avoided her, unwilling to be tied to the scandal of mismanaged funds. The woman who once bragged about rising from the ashes now lived in the shadow of her own ruin. One afternoon, a local journalist caught her outside a bank, trying to withdraw the last of her savings. Mrs. Hale, do you have any comment about the loss of your boutique and Langston & Co.'s acquisition? She forced a brittle smile. I'm rebuilding, she said weakly. That's what strong women do. But as soon as the cameras turned off, She sank against her car door, tears streaking down her face. Back at Langston & Co., Jonathan watched the interview quietly from his office. Grace entered with files and paused when she saw the footage. "You could have ruined her completely," she said softly. "You had every legal right to." Jonathan nodded. "That's not rebuilding. That's revenge. And I'm done with revenge." Grace smiled faintly. "Dad would be proud." He looked out the window again, the city gleaming beneath him. "I think he'd remind me that humility isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about rising without dragging anyone down." That evening, Jonathan attended a small community event. No red carpet, no press, just a group of local entrepreneurs sharing their struggles and victories. A young woman approached him, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Langston, your foundation gave me the loan I needed to reopen my bakery. You saved my dream." Jonathan smiled gently. "No, you saved it. I just believed you could." As he shook her hand, he felt something shift deep inside, a quiet satisfaction that no gala or fortune could ever match. For the first time, the empire he built didn't feel like armor. It felt like purpose. Across the city, Madison scrolled through social media late that night, watching clips of Jonathan's foundation launch. His face looked different now, stronger, calmer, radiant with peace. The headline read, "From betrayal to billionaire, the man who built Grace out of pain." She shut off her phone, curling up on her couch in a small apartment far from the penthouse she once flaunted. The silence was unbearable. In that stillness, Madison finally realized what she had lost wasn't just wealth or status. It was a man who had loved her purely and a life built on truth. Jonathan, meanwhile, sat alone in his office, the city lights glowing below. He whispered into the quiet, "You see, Dad, I didn't destroy her. I just outgrew her." The hum of the city filled the room, soft and steady, and for the first time since his heartbreak, Jonathan felt whole. Not because Madison had fallen, but because he had finally risen without needing her to. 5 years had passed, yet the memory of that night at the Grand Monarch still whispered through Atlanta's elite circles. The story of the man his wife mocked, who quietly became a $100 million mogul, had turned into a modern parable of dignity and restraint. Jonathan Langston's name now carried weight far beyond Georgia. His foundation had expanded nationwide, funding hundreds of startups, earning him national honors for ethical business leadership. His calm confidence, the same one Madison once mistook for weakness, had become the symbol of resilience admired across boardrooms and newsrooms alike. The world knew him as the silent rebuilder, the man who never retaliated, never spoke ill of his past, never gloated. He simply created. His presence alone was now an emblem of grace under betrayal. But for Madison, the years had been less kind. Her beauty, once her shield, had dulled under stress and struggle. She lived quietly in a modest apartment on the outskirts of Atlanta, working as a consultant for small salons that could barely afford her services. Every so often, she saw Jonathan's face on TV, launching a new women's business hub, shaking hands with senators, or speaking at Harvard about resilience in finance. She would turn off the screen each time, whispering through tears, "You did it, John. You really did." One morning, while sorting through her mail, Madison found a glossy envelope embossed with silver lettering. The Langston Foundation Gala, celebrating 10 years of empowerment. It was an open invitation, likely sent automatically to former associates in the beauty industry. She held it in trembling hands, staring at his name, wondering if fate was mocking her or offering a sliver of redemption. For 3 nights, she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every cruel word she had ever said, every moment she chose ego over loyalty, every time she could have stood beside him but didn't. On the 4th evening, she made a decision, one driven not by hope, but by the ache of closure. The gala was held in the same hotel where her downfall began, the Grand Monarch. Madison arrived quietly, wearing a simple black dress. She stayed at the back, away from the cameras, just another forgotten face in a room full of success stories Jonathan had helped create. When he walked in, the crowd rose in applause. Jonathan looked timeless, mature, composed, his once boyish gentleness now replaced with commanding calm. He spoke with warmth, acknowledging the women who had risen from bankruptcy to business ownership, from pain to power. His words were about growth, not revenge, about grace, not pride. When the speeches ended and the orchestra played, Madison approached him slowly, her steps hesitant. He turned before she could speak, as if he had felt her presence before seeing her. Their eyes met for the first time in 5 years. "Madison," he said quietly. His tone wasn't cold. It was simply distant, like a chapter long closed. "I almost didn't come," she whispered. I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. For everything. For the fire, the lies, the divorce. For not seeing who you were." Jonathan looked at her for a moment that felt eternal. "You don't owe me that, Madison. Time already said it for you." She bit her lip, tears brimming. "You built something beautiful, Jonathan. I used to think love made you weak. I was wrong." He smiled faintly. "Love doesn't make us weak. It just reveals who deserves it." Madison nodded, her voice breaking. "You must hate me." "No," he said softly. "I stopped hating you the day I realized you were never my punishment. You were my teacher." Her tears fell then, silently. "And what did I teach you?" He looked at her gently. "That sometimes losing someone isn't the end. It's the beginning of who you're meant to become." The music swelled softly in the background. She wanted to say more, to ask for another chance, but the words died in her throat. She could see it in his eyes. He had forgiven her, but he had long since moved beyond her. Jonathan extended his hand, not in love, but in closure. She took it, trembling. "Goodbye, Madison," he said. "Goodbye, Jonathan," she whispered, her voice shaking with everything she wished she'd said years ago. As she turned to leave, she caught her reflection in the ballroom mirror, older, humbler, stripped of pride but rich in clarity. He watched her walk away for the last time, then turned back toward the crowd, greeted by applause as another young entrepreneur approached to thank him for changing her life. And in that moment, Madison realized the full weight of her loss. It wasn't just a man, or money, or success. She had lost the kind of love that doesn't vanish when fortune fades. Jonathan stood at the podium again, smiling faintly as he said to the audience, "Sometimes life removes people from our story, not to hurt us, but to clear the path for who we're meant to be." The room erupted in applause. Madison slipped out quietly, her tears glistening under the chandeliers. Outside, the night air was cool, forgiving. She looked up at the city skyline and whispered, "Thank you for loving me once, Jonathan. You became everything I said you couldn't." Meanwhile, inside the ballroom, Jonathan raised a glass, not to wealth or victory, but to peace. Because real revenge was never about destroying her. It was about becoming untouchable by the pain she caused. It was a crisp autumn morning in Atlanta, the kind that carried peace instead of noise, closure instead of questions. Jonathan Langston stood on a small stage before a crowd of entrepreneurs, graduates, and community leaders gathered under a glass dome overlooking the city. The sun filtered through the skylight, bathing the room in gold. Behind him hung a simple banner, the Langston Business Integrity Center, opening day. This was his father's dream made real, a sanctuary for new beginnings. It had taken years, patience, and grace to reach this moment. The empire he built now employed thousands, mentored hundreds, and had transformed into something greater than wealth. Legacy. Jonathan adjusted the microphone, his calm voice resonating through the hall. "When my father wrote me that letter," he began, "he said something I didn't understand at the time. One day you'll realize that not every loss is meant to break you. Some losses are lessons in disguise. I used to think forgiveness was weakness. Now I know it's freedom." He paused, scanning the faces before him, some teary-eyed, others smiling with pride. "This center is built for the dreamers who were told they'd never rise again. Because sometimes the world doesn't believe in you until you build something that forces it to." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But even amid the cheers, Jonathan's expression stayed humble. He had become the man his father hoped he'd be, a leader who healed what betrayal once broke. After the ceremony, as guests mingled, Grace approached him with her usual quiet confidence. "You did it, John," she said softly. "He'd be proud." Jonathan smiled faintly. "I think he already knows." Outside, across the street, A woman watched from a park bench. Madison sat quietly, wearing a plain coat, her hair tied back, a coffee cup trembling in her hands. She hadn't come to intrude, only to witness. The papers had covered the opening, and she told herself she wouldn't go. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, pulled her here anyway. She watched as Jonathan greeted guests with warmth, his laughter light, his posture steady. He looked nothing like the man she had once mocked. He looked complete. She smiled weakly through tears. For years she had carried the weight of regret like a stone, wishing for one more moment to undo what pride had cost her. Now at her, seeing him like this, she realized there was nothing to undo, only something to understand. When the ceremony ended, Jonathan stepped outside briefly for air. The city breeze carried faint applause from the open doors. He glanced toward the bench across the street. For a fleeting second, their eyes met. Madison froze, her heart pounding. Jonathan didn't look angry or cold. He simply nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement. Not of her past, but of the journey that had led them both here. She nodded back, tears spilling silently. No words, no confrontation. Just the kind of silence that meant peace. A car pulled up for him, sleek and understated. As he climbed in, he looked back once more. Madison was still there, small against the backdrop of the city he had conquered, not as a man seeking revenge, but as one who had outgrown the need for it. When the car drove off, Madison stayed seated, whispering to herself, "He forgave me, and that's worth more than all the fortunes I ever chased." The wind rustled through the trees as if echoing his name. She looked up at the gleaming sign on the building, Langston Business Integrity Center, and smiled through her tears. "You rebuilt beautifully, Jonathan," she murmured. "You turned our ending into something the world could learn from." Inside the car, Jonathan gazed at the skyline, his city, his story. He thought of every night of silence, every cruel word, every betrayal that once tried to define him. They all felt distant now, like another lifetime. He whispered to himself, "Pain built the walls, but grace built the empire." The car disappeared into the morning traffic, leaving behind a city that now carried his name not as a reminder of loss, but as a testament to rebirth. Because in the end, Jonathan Langston didn't win by revenge or wealth. He won by mastering the one thing Madison never understood, that power means nothing if it doesn't come with peace. The screen would fade here, slow and golden, with the sound of soft music and Jonathan's final words echoing faintly in the background. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's proving yourself right by becoming everything they said you couldn't.